Hey, what's going on guys? Alex here from Mr. Build It, and in today's video we're going to show you how I took this under the staircase storage and turned it into that. So without wasting time, let me show you how I did it and let's get into the video. Let's go.
Mistakes now, 'cause I don't wanna stay, wanna live my own life, wanna feel passion for something or someone that may.
Perfect. This is a perfect example of just having a can-do attitude, having the right attitude, and we can solve any problem. Here's a perfect example. This right here is a support beam. This is basically every HGTV show where they're like, hey, let's take down this wall, open the room up. That's what's happening here. That's supporting the upper structure. These are the studs that are coming next to it. They are running, well, these are, I believe, 16 footers. No, these are 12 footers. 12 footers going up there. Now, to solve this problem, this is actually perfect practice for one day if I need to take down a wall and put a support beam. This is my perfect practice. I just have to practice doing this in a 6-foot manner as opposed to, you know, a 12 or 16-foot manner. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna cut this down there and there. And all of this is gonna be gone. Now, since we're gonna cut it there, this is exactly what's going on top right here. These are studs that are done or stopping and sitting on top of this beam. I am going to pick up a fresh board. This is, I believe, a 2x12. And I'm gonna run it across and secure it into this stud here. And then that will be our supporting piece for the top. Now we're gonna make sure it sits and it's anchored properly, but then at that point, it'll open everything up, it'll be structurally sound, and then we can patch everything up with drywall. So, solving problems, that's what we're in the business for, solving problems.
For the beam, I kind of recreated the existing dimensions, which is a 2x10 studs sandwiched between a 1/2-inch piece of plywood in order to accommodate the 3.5 inches that we need in thickness, and then secured with staggered 3-inch screws all the way throughout. Two of the biggest lessons I learned from framing the hard way through actually mistakes is, number one, always ask yourself, is the plane straight on both the X and the Y axis? Meaning you're not gonna have the wall leaning one way or leaning out the other way. And the second most important thing is asking yourself all the time is, when I install drywall to these studs, is there a possibility to attach or screw in the drywall along every edge? Both on the inside and the outside. And I can't tell you how many times I came to install the drywall and I didn't have anywhere to screw it in because I attached it on one side but not the other.
Couple of things I've learned the hard way over time when doing this stuff is the foundations of the stuff you're creating. So keep in mind, make sure before you hang in drywall, your studs, they have to have these corner studs in place. It allows for this piece to be secured and this piece to be secured. I can't tell you how many times I had floaters there, and again, I learned my lesson. Second thing is, when installing these little junction boxes for the outlets or the switches, these are gapped depending on the thickness of drywall that you're using. So there's a 1/2 inch, there's a 5/8, there's 3/8, I think. I don't know. I don't think there's 3/8. But anywho, you want to make sure that these little gaps are sitting on top of the studs and not behind them. That way, when we bring our drywall, it sits nice and flush with it. So little tricks that we're learning. And the wire, we're just using 14-2. This is your classic stuff that you can run in the studs, indoor applications, and it'll handle all the power that we need.
For electrical, I want to take this opportunity to create the environment that I wanted. So I wanted to install a couple of outlets, both in the cabinet and above the cabinet, as well as a light that will be above, illuminating the entire area, and a designated light switch for it. Now, when it comes to electrical, be sure to consult your local building codes and regulations in order to keep everything safe where you are.
So I'm getting, excuse me, I'm recording a video, is that okay? He's not feeling good, but he doesn't mind me working. When it comes to hanging drywall, this is the most important part, is you need special drywall screws. These are the phosphate coated ones meant for the interior. That way the stuff doesn't mold and get destroyed. And then I'm just gonna use a screw gun to start screwing it all in every, I don't know, 10 inches or so. So finally gonna see this space closed up. First sheet, really good progress. This is gonna be a good time.
So listen, if you're gonna take the time to make sure you had good, strong, straight, lined up, squared framing, you might as well take the opportunity to cut your drywall and create as tight joints as possible. The nice thing is you could always mud and tape any imperfections you're not happy with, but to really soak up the fruits of your labor, create tight drywall joints. They make for a proud and worthy build, I promise you. When taping the joints, essentially you're bringing two pieces of drywall together into one solid form. And to do so, you're gonna take your 6-inch drywall taping knife and spread the drywall compound along the joints. Then tear off the exact length of the tape that you'll need, lay it over the compound, and then use that drywall knife, the same one, and then run it squeezing all the compound out of that tape. Basically, you're pushing it flush onto the drywall. For corners, I'm using this 3M adhesive corner spray. You can always use the drywall compound itself, and I've done it for years, but this is the first time I decided to give it a try, and it worked exceptionally well. And the way you do it is you just shoot a light coat on the drywall corners themselves and on the inside of the corners you'll be putting on, and firmly press it in together. It dries very quickly and gets tacky super quick, so be sure to use a respirator when using this stuff because this stuff gets real smelly. After the first step, drywall compound dries, using 80 to 120 grit sandpaper, lightly sand all the harsh edges of the joint compound without exposing or sanding the joint tape that we laid down in our previous step.
Now that we got our first 2 coats of taping done, what we're gonna do now is the skim coat. Basically, you're blending everything together, putting a really fine layer of the mud on, and then after that, we'll be ready for texturing. So the particular style of texture we're gonna be doing is Santa Fe. Santa Fe is one of the easiest, and a lot of homes have that orange peel one, which is kind of nice because you just spray it. But in this situation, the best way I've learned to do this is you take your trowel or your knife, whatever you want, and you put a little bit on the edge, and you do a few skips, and then you kind of knock it down like that. It's a little bit of finesse, play around with it. You put a little too much, scrape it off, try it again. But play around with it, see what you feel. See what feels good on the trowel. Oh, another little tip is when you do an area like this, go a little bit further out to the good drywall. That way it blends everything in. I've learned that the hard way.
After the texture was done, I allowed the drywall compound to dry an extra 12 to 24 hours before painting it. To apply the paint, I'm using a Wagner Flexio 5000 sprayer, and I'm using a color called Frosty White paint and primer from Sherwin-Williams. Now, I found that in order to shoot the paint comfortably, I had to dilute it with about 10% water in order to shoot it through the sprayer the way I felt comfortable with. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are gonna be wondering what I think of the sprayer. As an organization freak, I really love how the Flexio 5000 comes all packed and built into the case ready. It stores the sprayer, the guns, the hoses, the built-in blower, and the power cables all inside of it. And if that's not organization, I don't know what is. And if you're wondering about overspray like anybody would with a sprayer, I was able to keep it to an absolute minimum with adequate flow regulation and obviously floor protection. After spraying down 3 to 4 coats of paint while it was drying, it was a perfect time to get started on the cabinet build.
We collide.
Typically, cheap store-bought cabinets are made out of 1/2-inch particle board for the base with reinforcement pieces and disguised with cheap 1/4-inch panels to give it the illusion of solid wood in order to keep costs low. Now, I decided to make mine out of 3/4-inch thick plywood to make sure that these cabinets will outlast the house itself. Not to mention the heavy countertop I'm planning for this cabinet.
Faces filled with sadness. When words are said, we'll regret. I can see the fire that we made just to save us. When we try to make up for never letting go. Said the things we promised not to say, then we break up just to start all over, even though we know This is the hard way better. We can be heartache together. This is the hard way better.
I think we're due for a little recap as far as what happened here. So we made our dimensions how we want them. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, these are like 34 inches tall. On average, they're 24, 26 inches deep. I mean, obviously longer or deeper. But here's a main idea down below here. I did a 3/8 and a 3/8 together, make 3/4. And that is a dado cut, and so basically a rabbet cut that this can sit right into it. And then these are just stretchers to reinforce it, just scrap pieces with pocket holes. And this is a toe kick right here. Typically it's 3.5 inches tall and 3 inches deep. When the cabinets connect together, we're gonna put a piece of trim there and get it all concealed. So basically that's the anatomy of your typical base cabinet. And now I'm gonna start working on the actual face frames. They are just 1.5 inches thickness. They're stiles and rails. We're gonna do pocket holes on the insides, put them together, throw some pocket holes here to secure it. Bada bing, bada boom. Simple stuff. I know you're probably thinking, not simple stuff. Don't worry, it wasn't simple for me for a while too. I just did this a few times. So just build a cabinet and then learn from it. So let's go.
For the face frame, I went with a 2-inch wide select pine wood. Now on the inside part, I created pocket holes and added some wood glue to secure it all in place. After that, I positioned all the pocket holes completely surrounding the cabinet in the areas that nobody would see, basically on the outside of the cabinet and not the inside. After everything was ready, I applied some wood glue and secured the face frame using pocket holes and some clamping pressure for easy application.
There's a lot of different ways of making cabinet doors. One way is to do like a shaker style. You just need a table saw and you need to create 1/4 inch channels. Basically 2/8 inch, which is the thickness of your blades, and bada bing, bada boom, it works no problem. I might show you guys that in this video. And the second way, like I said, the fancy way, is these are specialty router bits. They go into our router here. One is for the stiles and the rails, that is the outside frame part of a door, and then the other part is for the panel itself. So this creates that perfect cut. I've never done this actually, so it'll be fun to learn this together. So let's throw this in our router.
When aligned properly, the router bits create the perfect tight joints between the vertical stiles of the doors and the horizontal rails, and of course the center panels when assembling the doors. The stiles and rails are glued securely and the center panel just sits tightly without glue to allow for expansion and contraction, or wood movement as we like to call it, during the hot and cold seasons. So allowing for the wood movement, it gives room to the panels to relieve pressure and thus keeping the doors from warping over time. For the drawers, they're made out of 1/2 inch maple plywood for the sides and 1/4 inch maple plywood for the bottom, which is recessed in a 1/4 inch groove into the drawer. To get the 1/4 inch groove, just make 2 passes with your table saw, which is about 1/8 inch wide a pass. This is all done to keep the drawers light yet strong enough to handle what we ask of them.
To say that we break up just to start all over, even though we know.
While the doors and drawers were drying, I thought this was a perfect opportunity to get some paint done on the cabinets. I switched over to the finishing sprayer from the Wagner Flexio 5000 kit, and the people at the painting store recommended for me to use this water-based acrylic alkali, which the way they explained it to me, it's essentially you get the toughness of an oil-based paint while having the easy to use as a water-based paint. They said it thins out like a water-based paint, but when it dries after you sprayed, the water evaporates and the tough oil particles are stayed left on the cabinet to get that strong durability. It sprayed on very well and I'm very pleased with it so far. For the shelves, I decided to make hollow built-in shelves. Typically people use MDF when doing this to keep expenses low since they will be painting the shelves anyways. But since I will be staining these shelves, I decided to go with a sheet of 3/4 inch maple plywood. To give the shelves a solid look without having the edges banded or the exposed plywood layers, I decided to joint the top, bottom, and front pieces together at a 45 degrees. Essentially, I'm doing origami with these things in order to give the illusion of it being a solid wood shelf. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but I made a video of me going into greater details about building these shelves. I'll link it down in the description below if you guys want to pursue that build yourself and want a little bit more information about them.
All right, here's a little face frame piece, mitered 45 should hook it perfectly. This space is exactly the thickness, 3/4 inches right here. We're gonna add a little bit of wood glue. All right, moment of truth. Yeah!
After securing everything with brad nails, I filled in all the brad nail holes using wood filler, stained everything using a fruit wood color stain from Minwax, and finished off everything with a wipe-on polyurethane to protect these shelves for years to come. Cabinet installation went very smooth. The most important part is to use wedges to level the cabinet from both the back wall and from the bottom of the cabinet, and then securing it to the back wall studs through the back stretchers, as well as the sides of the face frames. Now, I recommend clamping the face frames together first. Level the cabinet with wedges, pre-drill the pilot holes in the face frame to prevent any kind of cracking or tear out in the wood, and then carefully drive 3.5-inch screws securing this cabinet in place. I cut the side filler pieces for the cabinet, painted them the same color as the cabinet, scribed from the inside with a pencil to get the fitted size, cut it on my table saw, and secured in place using wood glue and brad nails. If you're having a hard time getting it in place with some clamping pressure, you can put little wedges down the sides while the glue dries.
Alright, so the countertop build day is today. I've picked up a few supplies that'll be necessary for this job. First part is we have the concrete itself, some silicone and the caulking tool, and the MVP, the melamine.
I prepared the mold by degreasing with rubbing alcohol first, applying a light coat of automotive wax, and then applying a liberal amount of silicone into all the joints and edges, and using a caulk tool to spread it all out. Once it dried, I removed the excess squeeze out silicone, leaving only what's inside the center of the joints, to be what bevels the edges of the concrete when it dries. Then it was ready to start mixing the concrete. For the concrete, I used about 3.5 80-pound bags of the Quikrete Pro fiber reinforced mix and started mixing it to a consistency of oatmeal and filled the mold one bag at a time. Typically when pouring concrete countertops, you would lay down a metal mesh with the help to reinforce it. But this product already has the fiber reinforcement, so from my research, I do not need it. Now, check back in a few months and I'll tell you exactly how it's holding up, but I feel pretty confident about this. After the concrete cured for 3 days, I removed the molds and flipped the concrete countertop over to what now will be its top side. Filled any exposed air bubbles with a little bit of Portland cement. Once that dried, I lightly wet sanded it and applied a few coats of sealer to protect the countertop from staining. For the accent wall, I had half a sheet of MDF laying around from a previous project, so I cut up a bunch of 1-inch strips on my table saw. Now MDF is very porous when it comes to painting, so to make it easier for me, I first sprayed 2 coats of water-based primer using the finish sprayer attachment from the Wagner Flexio 5000, and when the boards were dry, I started coming up with a pattern and secured the strips to the drywall using 2.5-inch brad nails. After they were hung, I filled in all the nail holes using wood filler, sanded everything smooth, and then caulked around all the edges to give it a smooth built-in finish. I sprayed the new accent wall with the same color as I did the walls in the previous step.
Hey, that is it for me this week. Thanks so much for watching this video. It means the world to me. If you like projects like this or any other home improvement projects, please make sure to check out some of my other videos. Click the subscribe button. That way you'll be alerted every time we put a video out. Like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Check out the merch in the description down below. Check me out on Patreon. You'll see all the behind the scenes stuff, as well as price breakdowns and all the specialty products that I use. Remember, do not be afraid to make a mess. The bigger the mess that you create, the more opportunities there is to learn from it. Tune out this week. We'll see you guys next week. See ya. Bye. There we go. We got a hole. They're gonna look nice and nice. Nice and nice. They're gonna look nice. It's just single nice. What's the worst that can happen? Flood your house. Solving problems. That's what we're in the business for. Solving problems. Shut up. All right? We're just teaching people how to get started, and that is it.